Have you ever felt like everything you knew about someone was a lie? I did. The man I trusted, the man I thought I knew, was hiding a secret so dark it shattered my world. And when the truth came out, it turned everything upside down. This is the story of how I uncovered the truth and how it changed everything. My husband started switching my medication thinking I wouldn't notice. I stayed silent, watching, waiting until the day someone else took them by mistake and collapsed. Panic set in, lies unraveled, and I realized the pills were just the beginning. He wasn't just changing my medicine, he was changing my fate. The pill looked wrong in my palm. I stared at it, frozen in our sun-drenched kitchen, as the realization crashed over me like ice water. My fingers trembled as I held what should have been my daily thyroid medication, the one I'd taken faithfully for years. But something was off. The weight, the subtle texture, even the faint medicinal smell that normally accompanied it. Everything was wrong. Something the matter, Elaine? Andrew's voice cut through my thoughts, deceptively casual as he leaned against our marble countertop. 6 months into our marriage, and I suddenly felt like I was looking at a stranger. I met his gaze and made a split-second decision that would change everything. I smiled, raised the pill to my lips, and swallowed it with a sip of water. Nothing at all, I lied, matching his casual tone. Just thinking about all those charity board meetings today. His shoulders relaxed slightly, a subtle shift, most would miss, but I had become an expert at reading Andrew's micro-expressions. That tiny tell confirmed everything. My husband was tampering with my medication, and he was relieved I hadn't noticed. The symptoms had been building gradually over weeks. Exhaustion that sleep couldn't cure, mental fog that made simple tasks confusing, heart palpitations that woke me at night. At first, I blamed stress from managing my family's foundation. When I mentioned scheduling a doctor's appointment, Andrew had quickly offered to pick up my prescription refill himself. No need to add another errand to your busy schedule, he'd insisted, with that charming smile that had first captured my attention at the museum fundraiser where we met. Now that smile seemed practiced, calculated. I excused myself to the guest bathroom, locked the door, and leaned against the cool tile wall, fighting a wave of nausea that wasn't entirely physical. My marriage, my safety, my life, everything I thought I knew had just shattered. The question pounding through my head wasn't just why, but how I had missed the signs. The changes in Andrew had been gradual, but unmistakable. In retrospect, the attentive man who courted me with thoughtful gestures and stimulating conversation had slowly been replaced by someone who monitored my schedule, isolated me from friends with subtle manipulations, and most tellingly, showed increasing interest in my family's fortune. "Your trust fund setup is fascinating," he had commented recently, far too casually during dinner. "So it all transfers to your spouse if something happens to you?" "Smart estate planning," I'd explained, then went on to describe how my grandmother had structured everything to protect the family wealth, never imagining that I was essentially giving my husband a blueprint for my murder. That afternoon I waited until Andrew left for his weekly golf game before conducting a systematic search of our home. In his bedside drawer, nothing unusual. His office revealed financial statements showing alarming debt, far more than an investment banker should reasonably carry. But the damning evidence came from our master bathroom. Behind his collection of expensive colognes, I found an unmarked prescription bottle containing pills identical to the fake ones I'd been taking. Beside it was a small notebook with dates, dose messages, and clinical observations written in Andrew's precise handwriting. Symptoms progressing. Increased dosage. Today's estimated timeline to critical condition. 3 to 4 months. My hands shook so violently I almost dropped the evidence. The cold, clinical nature of it struck me more painfully than if he'd simply written, "I'm murdering my wife." This wasn't a crime of passion. It was calculated, researched, documented. My husband was slowly poisoning me to inherit my family's fortune. That night, as we prepared for bed, I watched him through new eyes as he asked solicitously about my headache from earlier. His concern, once touching, now seemed grotesque, a performance for an audience of one, a performance designed to mask his true intentions until my health deteriorated enough that my death would seem natural, expected. "I'm thinking of visiting my sister next weekend," I mentioned, testing his reaction. The flicker of alarm in his eyes confirmed my suspicion. "You've been so tired lately. Are you sure that's wise?" His hand rested on my shoulder, gentle but possessive. "Perhaps you're right," I conceded, noting how relief softened his features. After he fell asleep, I slipped out of bed and crept to the guest room, where I began the first entry in what would become my insurance policy, a detailed journal documenting every fake pill, every symptom, every suspicious comment or behavior. I wrote until dawn broke, emptying 6 months of growing doubts onto the pages. The next day, I visited a pharmacy across town, explaining that I needed an emergency refill because I'd accidentally dropped my pills down the sink. The pharmacist was sympathetic, especially when I mentioned my thyroid condition. With my actual medication secured, I developed a system. I would appear to take Andrew's counterfeit pills each morning, then take my real medication when I was alone. I converted an old makeup compact into a hiding place for my daily pills, keeping it in my purse where Andrew never looked. At night, I flushed his fake pills down the toilet at my office rather than at home, in case he checked our plumbing. In the following days, I carefully cultivated the image of a dutiful wife experiencing concerning health issues. I mentioned fatigue at appropriate intervals, cancelled lunch with friends, citing not feeling well, and researched the symptoms of the poisoning he expected. I performed weakness while gathering strength. Knowing each perfect performance brought me closer to understanding the full scope of his plan. The mask he wore was flawless: concerned husband, attentive caretaker, a man terribly worried about his declining wife. But my mask was better. Behind my facade of gradual illness and naive trust, I was building my case methodically, gathering evidence day by day. I didn't know yet how this would end, but I was certain of one thing. Andrew had gravely underestimated the woman he married. I wasn't just fighting for my life, I was reclaiming it, one counterfeit pill at a time. Sitting in our sunroom with my secret journal hidden beneath a gardening magazine, I found myself staring at our wedding photo on the side table. Andrew looked so handsome in his tailored suit, his arm wrapped protectively around my waist. My smile was radiant, hopeful. The smile of a woman who thought she'd found her forever partner after years of cautious dating. Now that same photo felt like evidence from a crime scene. We met at precisely the right moment, Andrew had told me that night at the museum fundraiser, his blue eyes twinkling in the chandelier light. I had been fresh from a broken engagement, vulnerable and questioning my judgment. He'd appeared like a dream. Attentive, cultured, seemingly successful, and so very interested in everything about me. The whirlwind romance that followed swept me off my feet before I could catch my breath. Looking back, I could now spot the calculation in what I'd mistaken for spontaneity. Andrew had researched me before our chance meeting. He knew about my family's manufacturing fortune, about my position on the museum board, even my favourite wine. What I had once interpreted as serendipity had actually been strategic planning. "Tell me about that financial advisor you mentioned," my best friend Sarah had asked over lunch, 3 months into my relationship with Andrew. "Something about his investment strategy didn't sound right when you described it," she had said. I had dismissed her concerns, attributing them to her natural protectiveness. "He's just aggressive with growth stocks. Not everyone plays it safe like your husband." Now, I remembered the flash of irritation that had crossed Andrew's face when I mentioned declining his suggestion to consolidate our accounts shortly after our engagement. "It would be more efficient," he insisted, quickly recovering his customary charm when I hesitated. But of course, whatever makes you comfortable, darling. Our wedding had been a lavish affair at my family's estate. Andrew's idea, though he'd made it seem like mine. You deserve to be celebrated properly, he had said, dismissing my suggestion of a smaller ceremony. I recalled now how he charmed my elderly relatives, memorizing details about their lives, finding subtle ways to mention the success of his investment firm. The morning after our wedding, he'd received a phone call that pulled him onto the balcony of our suite. I'd been half asleep, but now I remembered the harsh whisper, "I'll have it. The marriage is final now. You'll get your money." When I'd asked him later, he claimed it was a difficult client, laughing about honeymoon interruptions. I forced myself back to the present, closing the journal as I heard Andrew's key in the front door, right on schedule. He had been remarkably predictable since I'd begun monitoring his patterns. I quickly arranged myself on the couch, a blanket over my legs, my face composed into an expression of weariness. "Elaine," he called, his footsteps approaching the sunroom. I closed my eyes, faking sleep through barely open lids. I watched him pause in the doorway, studying me with an expression that chilled me, a clinical assessment rather than concern. He approached, adjusting the blanket with tender care that would have fooled me 3 weeks ago. "Tired again, sweetheart," he murmured when I pretended to wake. "I'm worried about you," he added softly, though I could sense the hint of calculation behind the concern. "Just a little nap," I said, infusing my voice with fragility. "How was your meeting?" "Productive. Everyone asked about you." His smile didn't reach his eyes. "Dr. Mercer called me back about your symptoms. He thinks we should increase your medication." My heart raced, but I kept my expression neutral. Dr. Mercer had been my physician for years, but I hadn't authorized him to discuss my case with Andrew. Either Andrew was lying or he had somehow manipulated my doctor. "That's probably wise," I agreed, noticing how his shoulders relaxed at my compliance. Later that evening, while Andrew showered, I slipped into his office. His computer screen was locked, but he'd carelessly left his briefcase unlatched. Inside, I found a manila envelope containing papers from a casino in Atlantic City, payment plans, promissory notes, threatening letters about outstanding debts, nearly $300,000 worth. The most recent letter mentioned alternative collection methods if payment wasn't received within 30 days, the date marking a timeline 2 weeks before he had begun tampering with my medication. Another document caught my eye. A life insurance policy on me, taken out 3 months ago for $2 million. My hand trembled as I photographed each document with my phone, carefully replacing everything exactly as I had found it. Back in our bedroom, I fed a dizzy spell. When Andrew emerged from the bathroom, he rushed to help me to bed, his concern appearing genuine to anyone who didn't know to look for the calculating glint behind it. "Maybe we should go to the emergency room," he suggested, though I detected reluctance in his tone. No, I protested weakly. "The doctor said these episodes might happen. I just need rest." His relief was palpable. "Whatever you need, I'm here," he promised, squeezing my hand. "You're everything to me." I squeezed back, wondering how many other women had heard those same words from him. Had there been others he'd tried to poison? Was I simply the latest, and perhaps most lucrative, target? That night, I updated my hidden journal with the new information about the gambling debts and the insurance policy. I researched quiet methods of copying files from a password-protected computer. I studied symptoms of different poisons, making notes about which ones I should begin mimicking to convince Andrew his plan was working. Each morning, I appeared slightly weaker. Each evening, I complained of new symptoms that matched what the poison should be doing. I cancelled lunch dates, spoke in a softer voice, and let my hand tremble visibly when lifting my water glass. Andrew played his role perfectly, the devoted husband facing his wife's mysterious illness with steadfast support. He insisted on accompanying me to doctor's appointments, always with a hand protectively at my elbow. He prepared special meals to help build my strength, meals I only pretended to eat, disposing of the food when he wasn't looking. "I don't know what I'd do without you," I told him one evening, my head resting weakly against his shoulder as we watched television. "You'll never have to find out," he promised, kissing my forehead. I smiled faintly, feeling the weight of my journal hidden beneath the mattress, filled with evidence of his betrayal. "I believe you," I whispered. In that moment, I saw his mask slip just for a second, revealing the cold satisfaction beneath. Behind our closed doors, two performances unfolded nightly, his of the devoted husband and mine of the dying wife. But only one of us knew we were both acting, and that made all the difference. The doorbell rang precisely at 6:15 p.m., unusually early for dinner guests, and Andrew tensed almost imperceptibly, a reaction so quick I would have missed it weeks ago, but now I caught everything. "Mom?" Andrew's voice carried a note of surprise that felt carefully rehearsed. Eleanor swept into our meticulously designed dining room, her designer coat draped over one arm, a bottle of expensive burgundy in her hand. "Surprise," she said, kissing Andrew's cheek. Her eyes swept the room, landing on me with a searching look that made me suddenly self-conscious of my deliberately pale complexion. "You look unwell," Eleanor observed. I managed a weak smile. "Just a bit under the weather." Andrew quickly intervened, pulling out a chair. "Mum, let me get you some wine. Red or white?" As he moved toward the kitchen, Eleanor settled beside me. Her perfume, a classic Chanel No. 5, was familiar, expensive, and methodical, just like her son. "I was in the neighborhood," she explained, though we both knew her neighborhood was 3 hours away. Her manicured fingers drummed against the table's edge, a nervous tell I was beginning to recognize as a family trait. Dinner was a carefully choreographed performance. Andrew served, I pushed food around my plate. Eleanor made polite conversation about family investments and local charity events. I noticed how she watched me, not with concern but with a clinical detachment that mirrored her son's. "Your medication," Eleanor said suddenly, reaching toward my water glass. "Mind if I take something for a headache?" Before I could respond, she'd already picked up my pill organizer, extracting a small blue tablet. Andrew's conversation about market trends died mid-sentence. Time seemed to slow. The pill disappeared between Eleanor's perfectly painted lips, a sip of water, a moment of absolute silence. Then everything changed. Her hand began to tremble, the wine glass slipped from her fingers and shattered against our imported marble floor. Eleanor's face twisted with confusion and growing panic, her breathing becoming labored, each breath a desperate struggle. "Mom?" Andrew's voice cracked. But there was something else in his tone, not pure shock, but something calculated. I stood frozen watching as Eleanor's body began to convulse. Andrew's reaction was clinical, almost professional. He didn't immediately call for help. Instead, he observed, his eyes calculating, measuring her response. The emergency services arrived in minutes, and the paramedics worked with practiced efficiency. Eleanor's body lay limp on our dining room floor, and I stood back, observing. Andrew's performance as the concerned son was masterful. But to me, it rang hollow. At the hospital, while Eleanor was rushed into emergency treatment, a young doctor pulled me aside. His name tag read, "Dr. Martinez," and his eyes were serious. "Mrs. Wner," he said quietly. "The initial toxicology report is unusual. The symptoms suggest deliberate poisoning, not a natural medical event." My heart raced, but I kept my face composed. "Poisoning?" He nodded, studying my reaction. "The medication your mother-in-law accidentally took isn't what it appears to be. There are trace compounds that shouldn't be present in standard prescription medication." Andrew approached, placing a hand on my shoulder. "What's happening?" he asked. The doctor hesitated, looking between us. "We'll need to run more comprehensive tests." I watched Andrew's face. A fleeting moment of fear. Calculation crossed his features before he masked it with concern. Eleanor survived, but something else died that night. My remaining illusion of safety. In the quiet of the hospital waiting room, surrounded by the sterile smell of disinfectant and unspoken tensions, I realized the full extent of Andrew's plan. This wasn't just about controlling me. This was about elimination. The medication mix-up had been no accident. Eleanor's unexpected visit had disrupted a carefully planned timeline, and now everything had changed. My husband wasn't just trying to make me sick, he was trying to kill me. As Andrew spoke softly with the doctors, his back turned, I pulled out my hidden journal. My hand didn't shake as I wrote. Not anymore, I thought. The game had just become infinitely more dangerous, and I was done being a passive player. The hospital's fluorescent lights flickered as I made my first strategic move. While Andrew was distracted with Eleanor's medical paperwork, I slipped into a quiet corner and dialed Sarah, my most trusted friend and a private investigator. "I need a favor," I whispered, my voice barely audible above the hospital's background noise. "Full confidential background check on my husband. Everything." Sarah's response was immediate. "Send me what you can. I'll start digging over the next 48 hours." Over the next few days, I transformed our home into a silent surveillance operation. Tech had always been my secret passion, a skill I developed during my years managing my family's complex financial systems. Andrew believed me to be technologically challenged, a carefully maintained illusion. I purchased specialized equipment from a discreet online store, micro cameras disguised as ordinary objects, a USB charger here, a decorative clock there, a digital picture frame strategically placed to capture Andrew's home office. Each device was meticulously installed when he was out. My hands were steady, my movements calculated. The family lawyer Marcus Reynolds agreed to meet me at a discreet coffee shop 3 towns away. I arrived early wearing oversized sunglasses and a scarf, a disguise that made me feel like a character in an old spy movie. "Mrs. Wna," Marcus greeted me, sliding a manila folder across the table. "I've been reviewing your prenuptial agreement. There are inconsistencies." The folder contained a series of documents that made my blood run cold. Financial records, property transfers, insurance policies, all pointing to a disturbing pattern. Andrew had a history of short-lived marriages, each ending with the wife's substantial financial settlement or mysterious health complications. "How many?" I asked, my voice barely a whisper. Marcus hesitated. 3 confirmed cases in the last 7 years, each woman wealthy, each marriage lasting less than 2 years, each ending with significant payouts. I memorized every detail, knowing I couldn't risk taking physical copies. My mind was becoming a living, breathing evidence vault. That evening, I returned home to find Andrew preparing dinner. His movements were tender, solicitous, the perfect husband routine. I played my part, allowing him to help me to a chair, accepting the glass of water he offered. "How's your mother?" I asked, watching his reaction carefully. A flicker of something, tension, fear, crossed his features. "Stable," he replied. "The doctors are running tests." My phone buzzed. A message from Sarah. "Check your email. You won't believe what I found." Later that night, after Andrew fell asleep, I accessed the encrypted email. Sarah had uncovered a trail of financial transactions, debt collections, and suspicious insurance claims. A pattern emerged. Andrew had a network of connections, each transaction more complex than the last. The most shocking discovery came from an unexpected source. A recorded phone conversation accidentally captured by one of my hidden devices. "I need the money now." Andrew's voice was hushed but intense. "The casino won't wait another month." The creditor's response was cold. "You have 2 weeks or we discuss alternative collection methods." I realized then that Eleanor's unexpected visit wasn't just a coincidence. She had become an unexpected complication in Andrew's carefully constructed plan. I began documenting everything: a secure cloud storage account, encrypted files, multiple backups. Each piece of evidence was a potential lifeline, a weapon against the man I'd once trusted completely. My family's forensic accounting training proved invaluable. I knew how to track financial trails, how to connect seemingly unrelated dots. Andrew thought he was marrying a simple socialite. Instead, he'd married someone who could dismantle his entire operation. The next morning, I scheduled a routine medical examination, an additional layer of medical documentation to support my declining health. The doctor, unaware of the silent war being waged in my marriage, noted my symptoms with professional detachment. "Your thyroid levels are concerning," he mentioned, reviewing the test results. "We'll need to monitor this closely." I smiled, knowing each document was another piece of my defensive strategy. By the end of the week, I had transformed from a potential victim to a calculated investigator. Andrew continued his performance of the devoted husband, bringing me tea, adjusting my blankets, monitoring my every move. But he didn't know that I was monitoring him even more closely. The evidence was mounting, the trap was being set, and Andrew had no idea what was coming. 3 days after her hospital release, Eleanor Werner arrived at a small cafe on the outskirts of town. Her pristine white blouse and tailored blazer spoke of old money and carefully maintained appearances, but her eyes, those piercing blue eyes so similar to Andrew's, betrayed a storm of internal conflict. "I didn't want to believe it," she said, her fingers wrapped around a half-empty espresso cup. The tremor in her hand was barely perceptible, but I noticed. We were alike in that way, masters of subtle observation. I studied her carefully. This wasn't a woman easily broken. This was a woman reassessing her entire understanding of her son. "Tell me everything," I prompted softly. Eleanor's laugh was bitter, unexpected. "Everything? Where would I even begin?" The story unfolded like a carefully choreographed dance of revelation. Andrew wasn't her biological son, a fact she had kept hidden for decades. Adopted as an infant, he'd always been different, calculating, ambitious in a way that went beyond normal familial drive. "His first wife," Eleanor murmured. "Rachel. She disappeared 3 years into their marriage. Massive life insurance payout. Nobody ever found." The pieces started connecting. Sarah's investigative work, the financial records, the pattern of strategic marriages. "How long have you known?" I asked her. Silence was more revealing than any words. "I suspected," Eleanor corrected. "But mothers have a remarkable capacity for denial." We spent hours mapping out Andrew's history, financial records, medical histories of previous wives, insurance claims. Each document painted a more sinister picture. "He was always good at playing the perfect son," she continued. "Scholarships, perfect grades, always the most charming person in the room." I pulled out my encrypted folder of evidence. Financial trails, iCal records, recorded conversations. Eleanor leaned forward, her professional investigator instincts taking over. "We need a plan," she said suddenly. The transformation was remarkable, from reluctant mother to strategic ally. Our strategy emerged slowly, meticulously. We would need absolute proof, something that couldn't be explained away by clever lawyers or manipulated narratives. "He'll never suspect us working together," Eleanor said, a hint of a smile playing on her lips. "He always thought I was predictable." We agreed on a complex approach. Eleanor would maintain her role as the concerned mother. I would continue my careful documentation. We'd create a narrative so airtight that Andrew would have no escape. "My son is a predator," Eleanor said quietly, the words hanging between us like a heavy curtain. "And I will not let him destroy another life." Her resolve was absolute. The maternal instinct had transformed into something colder, more calculated. Protection had become a form of ruthless justice. We exchanged encrypted contact information, burner phones, secure communication channels. Each step calculated to prevent Andrew from detecting our alliance. "He'll come after you," Eleanor warned. Once he realizes you're not the easy target he believed. I thought about the evidence I'd gathered, the hidden cameras, the financial trails, the medical documentation. Let him try, I responded. As we prepared to part, Eleanor reached into her designer handbag and pulled out a small USB drive. Something you might find useful, she said, handing it to me. Financial records from before his first marriage. Things I've kept hidden, waiting for the right moment. The drive felt heavy with potential, the secrets. Our unlikely alliance was sealed with a simple nod. No dramatic promises, no emotional declarations, just a mutual understanding that we would see this through. Andrew believed he was playing a sophisticated game of manipulation and murder. He had no idea we were 3 moves ahead, rewriting his entire strategy. The hunter was about to become the hunted. The dinner invitation arrived on cream-coloured cardstock. Classic, understated, quintessentially Andrew. A small gathering of our closest social circle, 6 guests carefully selected, each strategically important to Andrew's professional network. I studied the invitation, my hand deliberately trembling as I set it down. Andrew watched from across the room, his eyes calculating, believing I was growing progressively weaker. "Are you sure you're up for hosting?" he asked, his voice dripping with manufactured concern. "We could always cancel." "No," I whispered, infusing my voice with fragility. "I want to do this." Marcus Reynolds, our family attorney, had meticulously helped us craft every detail. Eleanor's USB drive had provided crucial financial documentation. Each piece of evidence was carefully positioned, waiting to be revealed at the perfect moment. My preparation was clinical. Makeup to enhance my pale complexion, carefully selected clothing that hung loosely, suggesting dramatic weight loss. Every movement calculated to convince Andrew his plan was progressing perfectly. The week before the dinner, I intentionally missed 2 of my prescribed medications. Andrew's excitement was palpable. He believed I was becoming more vulnerable with each passing day. "I've spoken with Dr. Carlton," he mentioned casually one morning. "He agrees we should consider more aggressive treatment options." I knew Dr. Carlton was a fabrication, another layer of Andrew's elaborate deception. Eleanor's guidance had been precise. "Let him believe he's winning," she'd advised during our clandestine meeting. "The more confident he becomes, the more careless he'll be." As the dinner party approached, I began leaving strategic evidence of my declining health. A half-eaten meal here, a medication bottle mysteriously left open there. Subtle breadcrumbs that would feed Andrew's growing confidence. The night of the dinner arrived with surgical precision. Our dining room transformed into a stage. Each guest a potential witness to what was about to unfold. Andrew's colleagues from the investment firm arrived first. Robert and Margaret Thompson. Old money, influential connections. Then the Heresies, a power couple in local real estate. Each carefully selected, each unaware they were about to witness the unravelling of a meticulously planned murder attempt. I moved through the evening like a fragile butterfly, my movements deliberate yet seemingly uncontrolled. Conversations flowed around me as I played my part, the sickly wife, grateful for her husband's attentive care. "Andrew has been so wonderful," I murmured when Margaret asked about my health. "I don't know what I would do without him." Andrew's hand rested on my shoulder, possessive, protective. To the outside world, we were a picture of marital devotion. To me, it was a calculated grip of control. As dessert was served, I noticed the subtle changes in Andrew's movements. His confidence grew. His eyes gleamed with a predatory satisfaction he could no longer fully conceal. "Another glass of wine?" he asked, refilling glasses with practiced charm. My glass remained untouched, a silent signal to Eleanor, who sat across the room, her expression carefully neutral. Marcus Reynolds arrived late, intentionally. His arrival was a carefully timed interruption, a catalyst for what was to come. "Might we discuss something?" Marcus said, his voice cutting through the dinner conversation. Andrew's smile never wavered, but I saw the micro-expression of tension, the slightest tightening around his eyes. The trap was set, the players in position, and Andrew had no idea the game was about to change forever. My hand, which had been trembling all evening, suddenly became rock-steady. The performance was nearly complete. All we needed now was the final act. The silence that followed Marcus's arrival was razor-sharp. "Ladies and gentlemen," Marcus began, his voice cutting through the dinner party's carefully maintained facade. "We have some matters that require immediate discussion." Andrew's smile froze. For the first time, I saw genuine fear flicker behind his eyes. Eleanor placed a USB drive on the table, a simple action that carried the weight of a nuclear detonation. The Thompsons exchanged confused glances as Marcus connected the drive to a laptop. Financial records materialized on the screen. Bank transfers, insurance policies, a trail of calculated moves spanning years. Each document told a story of calculated destruction. Previous wives, mysterious medical incidents, substantial payouts. "Mr. Warner," Marcus said, his tone clinical, "would you care to explain these transactions?" Andrew's composure began to crack. Beads of sweat formed on his forehead, an unmistakable tell he couldn't control. "I'm sure there's a misunderstanding," he stammered. I spoke for the first time that evening, my voice clear and steady. "No misunderstandings, Andrew. Just evidence." The next hour unfolded like a meticulously planned performance. Security camera footage from our home, recorded conversations, medical reports documenting the systematic poisoning attempts, each piece of evidence more damning than the last. Margaret Thompson gasped when the full extent of Andrew's actions became clear. Robert's hand gripped her shoulder, his face a mixture of shock and disgust. "You tried to kill your own wife?" Eleanor said, her voice devoid of emotion. "For money? For nothing?" Andrew's desperation became palpable. "You don't understand," he pleaded, looking around the room. "I can explain everything." But there was nothing to explain. The evidence was overwhelming. The police arrived quietly, professionally. No dramatic confrontation, just the calm efficiency of law enforcement executing a carefully prepared warrant. As they approached Andrew, he looked at me, a final desperate attempt to find some weakness, some vulnerability. I met his gaze without flinching. The legal proceedings that followed were swift. Multiple investigations launched, not just into the attempted murder, but into a pattern of calculated crimes spanning years. Andrew's investment firm crumbled, and his professional reputation disintegrated overnight. Eleanor's journey was perhaps the most complex. A mother confronting the brutal truth about her son, a child she had loved, supported, and ultimately failed to truly see. "I should have known," she told me months later, during one of our regular meetings. "The signs were always there." But healing wasn't about blame. It was about moving forward. My recovery was methodical, much like everything else in my life. Medical treatments reversed the damage from Andrew's poisoning. Therapy helped me process the trauma. And each day I reclaimed a piece of myself. The family fortune, which Andrew had seen as nothing more than a prize to be won, became a tool for healing. I established a foundation supporting victims of domestic manipulation. Helping others became my form of ultimate justice. 1 year to the day after Andrew's arrest, I stood in the museum where we'd first met, the same location that had once been the stage for his carefully constructed courtship. Sarah, my private investigator friend, stood beside me. "How does it feel?" she asked. I watched a young couple laughing near an exhibit. Their connection was genuine and unforced. "Free," I responded. The USB drive containing all the evidence sat in a secure vault, not as a reminder of pain, but as a testament to survival, to resilience. Justice, I'd learned, wasn't about revenge. It was about reclaiming your narrative, about transforming a story of victimhood into one of strength. Andrew would spend years in prison, his carefully constructed life dismantled piece by piece. But I was just beginning to build mine.